Hello, welcome to Ray Recommends. My name is Raymond Antrobus. I'm here with the one, the only, the Dizraeli. Hello. How art thou?
The art is good.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me into your studio. Really nice setup, man. I'm loving how the variation of the instruments, the small space. You've got like a manifesto on the wall there, like a mantra kind of.
Yeah, I need to write notes to myself to remind myself what I'm about.
Yeah, man. I'm inspired by that.
Because it's easy to forget and get distracted by the screens.
Yeah, I do. We were at Tong Foods. I only got to speak to you briefly. You know, we were talking about travelling. I think both of us are, you know, you're a musician, you're a writer, you're a poet. You do a lot of travelling. I myself do a lot of travelling, and I always find that it feeds my thinking, my writing, my performing. You recently had you've been to Senegal. Like how is your travel or your latest travels informing your new kind of artistic practice and thinking?
Yeah, I just got back from spending 6 weeks in Senegal, where I was studying the balafon with a teacher there. Wow. And the balafon is this is a balafon.
Nice.
Kind of xylophone, I was kind of there on a whim, really, because I had some time without any gigs, and I sublet my room here and just decided to go. And I went to Senegal without knowing anything about it other than I loved the music that I heard from Senegal. So I wanted to learn something about that. And what I ended up coming back with was a lot more than that. You know, as you might expect from a country that has more to offer than a discipline.
Bugger-brained fingering guitar tunes, horribly the harsh truth is that he is done. And he was something like the new hope, now he's on a chewed rope drinking in the sun. He's ate nothing for a few days, living out a suitcase, what has he become? But he isn't an emotional man, doesn't cry when he's burying his dad, doesn't cry when his wife says you're dead to me, see how high he's carrying his head. So high it could tumble off the back, with the hat still covering the eyes, with the music crumpled up inside, still mumbling the fun we could have had. Est-ce qu'on est là, on est là. Est-ce qu'on est là, on est là. Est-ce qu'on est là, on est là. Est-ce qu'on est là, on est là.
It made me reflect a lot, and Senegal obviously has economic problems, and you know, as testified by the number of Senegalese people that are coming over to Europe on these smuggling routes, and you know, going through huge hardships to try and reach a place that they perceive as more opportunities. So yeah, there are obviously some problems in Senegal, but largely I found that the culture there was just so much more on point than ours in so many ways. And one of the huge ways it was really on point, I found, was just through their approach to the individual and the collective, and also their approach to art as well. Over there, culture is seen as something that is just a common good. It's just like, it's something that we share. It's in the same way that we share, you know, the land we walk on and the air we breathe. By culture, I mean, obviously, like we are living and breathing culture all the time. We have our tendencies and our habits and our currency and our clothes, and you know, it's all part of our culture. But I mean specifically creative culture, artistic culture. Right. Yeah, there's just a very different approach to. Whereas here, because we're in such a supposedly advanced capitalist country, everything's commodified. You know, anything that can be commodified and sold and consumed will be commodified and sold and consumed. Yeah. And you know, art and poetry and music is sadly not immune from that. So,
Bosch chemical cudgels for the added feeling. White boys pirating the culture of the Caribbean. Kind of red stripe from the bed me Asda. The bass is the bollocks. The drop is the Viagra.
Here we have our qualifications and our career paths, which define what we consider ourselves able to do. You know, you were talking earlier on about wanting to sing. You know, But if we were in Senegal, you wouldn't even ask the question. You would just be singing anyway, irrespective of whether you think you can sing, whether you've been told you're a singer or not. Whereas here we have a sense that we must stick to our boxes. Some of us have the right to produce art, and the others must consume it. You know, those who consider themselves artists must always create with the idea that they are making a commodity to be consumed.
And are the artists surviving? Are they surviving in Senegal?
Well, this is the thing, man. Obviously, I don't want to romanticise the situation.
No,
a lot
of
of people have a lot less means and material possessions there, and people are eating less there than they eat here.
Yeah.
Artists are surviving. Artists are surviving mainly off the tourist industry, to be fair.
Yeah.
But the thing that I see, the thing that I do see, like in spite of all those problems, is artists are surviving because everyone is an artist.
Mm.
It's not like, do you know what I mean? It's not like I must be defined as an artist to make and sell art.
Because we were also talking about the importance of community, and it just hit me recently. I was like, wow, man, I've been a poet for like 9-10 years now, and it caused a lot of a kind of reflection on what the journey has been, not just in terms of my writing and the kind of stages I'm on, but also the kind of people that I'm around in order to go on in this culture to be what's the conventional ideas of being a successful artist, and how much not just sacrifice is made on that path, but how much of yourself is lost, and how many people you leave behind or step over. Like the way that you're talking about in Senegal, how important it sounds like the artist's role is in a community.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And there's just a general there's a sense of community and togetherness that I found in Senegal that I find really chronically lacking here, especially in London, actually, because I always moved through London as an outsider. I'm not from here. I'm from the West Country, and I lived in Brighton for 11 years as well, which is a much smaller town where there is more of a sense of community than here. But yeah, in Senegal, the catchphrase is "On est ensemble," we are together.
Yeah.
If someone does something really lovely for you and you thank them for it, which is quite a European thing to do, you thank them for it, they say, "We are together." So, of course I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And there's just a sense of people helping each other out. If there's someone in a community that's ailing and not able to work, then they will be supported by their friends. If someone comes into money, they will share it amongst their family and their community. Whereas in our Western capitalist culture, we are fed from birth this idea of the solitary hero. We're like, I don't know, like the Conan the Barbarian or Commando, or all the kind of the role models we're given as people, ways of being to aspire to, are solitary heroes that strike out, follow their dreams, do that at the expense of their bonds with their community, and it's something that I really want to see us try and reclaim as a culture, is our sense of togetherness, on est ensemble, because no artist exists in a vacuum. I mean, it's said over and over again, isn't it? No artist exists in a vacuum. Every great piece of art throughout the history of mankind has been created because the artist is inspired, and the artist is inspired by other human beings and other artists and people, his peers or her peers and their community, and we all come from a context. I don't know. That's something I wanna really nurture, is the sense that I'm from a place, I'm from a community, I have amazingly talented people all around me, and I want to talk to my peers and be inspired by them, and not feel like, as a kind of Western artist, that I have to shut myself away in a tower and seek my great work of genius and then make my appearance in the world and make loads of money from it. So I don't want to do that. I want to exist in a confluence of minds and cultural exchanges. We're all out here living, and I think we're increasingly atomized. We're increasingly isolated and shut away into our boxes. I think especially in the winter months we feel it.
We're really, just coming out, man. The sun just out. What have you learned from being a public figure or being on stage? There are certain things certain conversations which I had. I mean, I'll give a concrete example. Probably when I was about 19, I'd written this piece about being in an abusive relationship, and I wrote this whole piece about the perspective of a man in a relationship with a woman who's abusive, and not knowing what those lines are. And I learned so much from sharing that poem with people. But learned probably not in the most appropriate way because it was such a public space. And so, you know, it was, I'd read that poem and instantly the audience would divide, and it wasn't, I didn't realise how controversial it was until I remember I did it in Chicago, and I come off stage and I went to the bar to get a drink, and there was these about 10 women all having a full-on argument about that piece.
Right, okay.
And it was just like, wow. And then other poets had to pull me up and be like, look, I think there's some more nuanced things that need to be explored and blah, blah, blah.
Right,
and now, you know, that gave me such a...
Because of the wider context of so many women being abused by men.
Exactly.
Yeah,
because someone's had to come up to me and say, listen, dude, 2 women a day are killed at the hands of men.
Yeah,
you know? So you might want to kind of consider these other things, these other sides. You know, I understand what you're saying, and this is your experience. Where I feel like I learned so much in a public space. Like, do you have any kind of experiences where you're like, right, I've learned something in this space which I couldn't have learned any other way? Like, you learned this because of your connection and your community and your people and your art.
I mean, I think that, like you say, when every time you get up on a stage, you're in a very public place, but you are effectively also in conversation with your audience, aren't you?
Yeah.
Or like, at least ideally, you're in conversation with your audience, and hopefully you get to meet your audience afterwards and find out what the impact of your work has been on them, or how, you know, how they've taken it. Obviously, because your work, it's not like you're the artist delivering this complete thing to the audience. It exists in a space between you, so it's good to know what it's become with that audience, isn't it? Yeah, I think that. What have I learned? I've learned that people take a lot of strength from vulnerability, from an artist showing vulnerability. I used to be a real kind of polemic kind of poet, rapper, and shout a lot about political things and broader sort of ideological points. And there was a certain point in my artistic life when I started writing about my own experiences and my own family and my own emotional life and my own little struggles, and I suddenly started connecting with my audience 1,000 times more than I had before. And every time I perform now, there's always someone that comes up to me afterwards and shares their story with me in the same way that I've shared my story with them. And it has become a conversation much more than it was before, when I was like making my point, and then, you know, and the audience agreed or didn't agree. But it's a very, very powerful thing to speak your own weaknesses and to speak your own your own detail, because people can't argue with that, you know. Well, that's your version of things. And so I guess I've learned a lot from that. I've learned to be vulnerable in my day-to-day life with friends and people that I meet, from being vulnerable as an artist, weirdly. It sort of came that way around for me. Realising, because I was just, as you know, like writing poetry or lyrics is a strangely private activity that then flips to become very public, right? So you can kind of feel like you're indulging in some kind of isolated, self-nurturing therapy alone in your room, and then suddenly it's a song and you're on stage delivering it like, oh fuck, this is actually something that I wouldn't say to my friends. It's now transitioned to become, you know, something that I'm doing to 4,000 people. So yeah, in a way, I learned from being vulnerable on stage and having the audience just be so receptive to that. And you know, I'm really blessed. The crowds I tend to end up performing to just tend to be super open-minded, lovely people somehow. Like I've very rarely, you know, done a gig where I feel like the crowd is hostile to what I'm trying to do. So I'm very lucky in that respect. And from that kind of nurturing on stage, where I'm sharing my heart and soul, I've been able to take that into my real life. I mean, actually, I can be really myself. Yeah. And one thing that applies to for me is in my sexuality, because I recently, like in the last year, came out as bisexual on stage in front of like thousands of people at like about 10 gigs in a row.
Wow,
and before that had only come out to, I think, 6 or 7 people in my life. And yeah, that's another instance in which like I learnt to be brave by the kind of respect and open-mindedness the audience was giving me, and so now I've come out to the world and it feels amazing.
The chain has been taken off.
Oh mate, yeah.
So did you feel like there's a responsibility for like kind of bisexual visibility? Like, is that now playing into your art, into your music, into your poetry?
Yeah, I do. And it's a really hard responsibility to take on, because there is still a lot of stigma attached to homosexuality.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm from a slightly different generation to the kind of mainstream culture now, because I'm 33 years old. I grew up in the 80s and 90s in the West Country, which was fairly backwards, and it's, I'd never seen two men holding hands until I moved to Brighton at the age of 19, So I grew up with a lot of self-loathing and a lot of really complicated feelings about my sexuality. So it was a very hard process to take on that responsibility. But I did feel that it was time that I sort of took that on and represented what I am to the world, because I had not a single role model growing up, and not a single person in hip hop whom I admired coming out in public. And I know there's plenty of hip hop artists that are not straight, but how many have you heard of?
Yeah.
And I know that in my own journey, it could have given me so much comfort and reassurance and strength and courage and self-love, which is a really, really important factor. It's like everyone knows that prejudice engenders self-hatred in the victims of that prejudice, right?
Yeah.
So it works for race, it works for sexuality. It's like if you hear around you prejudice about homosexuality, and every time someone says something that is weak or pathetic or stupid is gay, and people talk about gay people in a way that makes them sound dirty and stupid or less than men, and that applies to you. You internalise that eventually, and it becomes self-hatred. So I think that the thing that inspired me to come out more publicly, partly my girlfriend who was just like, it's time, mate, sort of thing. And she's a very courageous, unapologetic fighter for the good fight. So thank you, Amanda. And partly, just that thing of being like, okay, I'm 33 years old. If I'm not going to come out now, I never am. And I need to just liberate myself, because I was writing about my experience in all these kind of sideways ways, talking about struggling with monsters and being locked away and all this sort of stuff. In all so many lyrics, it was coming out anyway, and I just need to be able to talk this shit. And I need to be able to give people the space to love themselves in a way that I was not able to do as a young person, and so that's really what brought that about.
Has that changed, since that's been public? Has that changed people's response to you and your music and your art?
I've had supportive messages from really surprising places.
Nice.
People in UK hip hop that I never thought would have reached out to me on any level, let alone about sexuality. There's been a little bit of hate, I did an anti-homophobia tune last year called The Depths, which was very much about my own personal experience with self-loathing and struggling with sexuality. And there was a little bit of homophobic trolling on that, as you might imagine, as it happened. But in general, it's been an amazing amount of support, and every time I announced this on stage last year, the whole crowd went mental and was cheering and whooping, and I was like, whoa, really? And then I had people come up to me afterwards and saying, it's so good to hear someone be honest about this stuff, and I'm bi too, and I never hear anyone talk about it, and so that's given me a lot more courage and strength to keep talking about it. And also, beyond my sort of experience of performing on stage and my experience of how I'm received by other people, I just feel good. I feel more myself than I've ever felt in my life, and it's such a release. I've just recorded a new record, and I feel like I sound more like me on this record than I've ever sounded on anything I've done in my life, just purely because I'm able to be myself, and there's not whole corridors of my mind that are shut away and not allowed to breathe, so it's strongly recommend anyone that's bottling this shit up to just come out with it because it feels good. Yeah.
Rowan recommends. Oh man, brilliant. No, well, thank you so much for inviting me into your studio and sharing the stories, sharing time, sharing heart. I appreciate that very much. Thank you so
man.
much.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, man.
Right.
Ray recommends.